Nice.
There were still a lot of people outside, so we'll wait.
Sorry?
There were a lot of people outside, so we'll wait.
Yeah. Everyone stayed in time. It's very nice outside.
It is nice.
And then, particularly when you get buried underground. Yeah. So then you work in the office in Oslo then? Yeah.
Yeah.
You live in Oslo?
No, I live in Warwick. Warwick?
Yeah.
It's not too far.
It's not too far. What side of Oslo?
Oh, it's north, so it's probably it's half an hour on a train.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
Which is good.
I lived in Oxford for many years. I really enjoyed it. I managed to live basically in the city itself, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
Because the school provided me with a place, otherwise it's unaffordable.
Yeah, it's hugely expensive.
It's
It's life, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, what you pay for. It's true. What's your role then?
Sorry?
What do you do when you're not at Foyer?
Sure.
What do you do when you're not at Foyer?
I'm actually a professor of intercultural theology, so I work at university. Yeah.
Very good.
Huh? Yeah.
Which university?
The Protestant Theological University in the Netherlands.
Okay.
Yeah. And as part the theology of religions is part of my brief, so that is why I'm sort of engaging in these type of questions. Yeah.
Great. How do you find that as a Christian or faculty? Is it secular? No,
It's not a secular university. It's a Christian, it's a Protestant university, but it's very broad. I have colleagues who believe in God. They consider themselves theologians.
Sure.
But they accept, they believe that all language about God is human language and we should just accept it.
Sure. Yeah, I read theology at King's London.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating experience to witness people who've got no personal faith.
Yeah, but on the other end, our university has recently been moving closer to the church.
Yeah.
And therefore, because of that, they also be more interested in church renewal.
Yeah.
So, for example, 40% of my job is paid directly by the church.
Okay.
But it's a research that happened lately. And the type of that role is worldwide perspectives and local mission calling. So they wanted to think from the global church about what happens locally in mission. And that's really quite encouraging that they're interested in learning from the global church for local mission. Yeah.
Brilliant. That's good. Hi, my name's Ben. I work for the IFES movement in the UK called UCCF, and my job is to be host for the session, which basically means I stand up, introduce Benno, and then sit back down. But I'm also going to pray for our time and pray for Benno, and then I'm going to hand over to him. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much that you are one true God. You're the one who has revealed yourself in the person of Jesus. And Lord, we pray that as we meet together this afternoon, you might help us to think about how we engage with people who don't share that view and who haven't come to know Jesus for themselves, and how we might engage them in such a way that draws them to the person of Christ. So Lord, pray for Benno, pray for the prep that he's put in, and Lord, pray that now by your Spirit we might use him to help shape our thinking and our practice. In your Son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Ben. Welcome. I have to think that I won't stand in the light of my own slide. Please find a seat. So I want to reflect with you on the question of the place of apologetics, of apologetic engagements. I don't know, like the word apologetic so much, sounds very argumentative, very one-sided. So let's say apologetic witness or apologetic dialogue in relationship with people from other religions. And I propose that I will give an introduction of maybe 40 minutes, you can ask questions maybe of clarification if I just go too far or I use concepts that are part of my discipline. I'm a professor of agricultural theology. And then there will be, I think, plenty of time for, or I hope plenty of time for engagement where we can also discuss not just the things that I have brought in, but examples you have and that you may want to bring in. Yeah? Let me start with an example. This is basically my slide, by the way. So if you capture this in your mind, you've got my talk. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
In year 2002 to 2003, I had a position as a scholar in residence in Vancouver, in Regent College, Vancouver. That's about, as an academic, it's about the best position you can have because it means you're in a school. And I was there for a year. You have all the privileges of an academic, none of the responsibilities. You know, I was there for a year with my family. In the church where we visited, I met Won Suk. Won Suk is not his real name. Won Suk was also a visiting scholar. He was from South Korea. He was a historian of economy, so an academic, like me. But he was a Buddhist. But Buddhist temple was too far, so we went to the Anglican church to meditate. And we struck up a friendship, and for about 6 months, we met every week, one-on-one, an evening, to explore each other's religion and faith. And what happened in that period is that I discovered how far apart we were in many respects. Our perspectives on life were entirely different. And in that sense, dialogue was really complex. But on the other hand, we were also quite close. We both were academics, and we loved being academics. We were married. We loved working in another context. We enjoyed Vancouver. We had children, etc. So there was also a lot in common. But the dialogue was a real challenge, and I directly point to the challenges I list here in relation to what happened with Won Suk. First of all, religion is entirely encompassing. You know, it encompasses everything we believe. We had, in terms of our deepest belief, virtually nothing in common, except maybe, and that could be a starting point, the conviction that what we see is not what it is. Yeah? That was a starting point to converse seriously. Secondly, we didn't even expect very different things from our religion. We had a very different concept of flourishing. Now, for me, flourishing is related to God, but flourishing is also very earthly in relation to my family, in relation to the people around, in my work. For Won Suk's religion was basically about helping him to disattach from everything that could cause suffering. That included investing not too much in his job, which I could recognize in a way, that that's a dangerous thing if you're an academic. But it included also that he said, one day, when I can be more serious about my religion, I will leave my wife and children, my wife and my son, because then I completely give me, because, you know, this attachment is only a cause of suffering. While for me, actually, my relationship with my wife and 3 sons is not only a cause of joy, but I feel that that is an area where I can live out my Christian faith. We had very different understandings even of how we come to know religious truth. It's not that we could say, you know, we have a common starting point, let's hash it out. And I would say, let's talk about Jesus. And for him, actually, history couldn't have any meaning, let alone religious meaning. He went to the Buddha and some religious experience the Buddha once had of enlightenment, which I had no relationship with. And one of the things I also discovered in that context is that things that do not work for you, that invite you to critique others, might not have a lot of traction for the persons you talk with. First of all, I think a general rule when you talk to other people, and also interreligiously, is that if you attack others, people will defend. Yeah? Alistair McGrath somewhere. I like Alistair McGrath as an apologist, but here's somewhere a line where he says, this argument works as a real battering ram. And I think, an argument that works as a battering ram is probably not very effective because people will close their doors when the battering ram is falling. Yeah? So that's what's happening. But we also need to realize that arguments that have quite a bit of weight for us do not have the same weight for others. This was actually brought out quite famously by Evans Pritchard, who was an anthropologist and who studied Nuer religion and Zande religion in what is now southern Sudan. And he showed that things that do not work, that for a Westerner or a Christian maybe, are an obvious sign that a certain practice is not working, do not have that weight for the people concerned. And he uses the example of the poison miracle. The poison miracle means that, in that context, it meant someone is accused of adultery, and in order to work out whether the accusation is fair, you prepare some mystical poison. Yeah? The woman, it's always the woman we're concerned about, drinks it, and if she dies, she's guilty. If she doesn't die, she's not guilty. Suppose, he says, we prepare the poison miracle, and the woman doesn't die, so we think she's not guilty, but the baby's born and looks terrifically like the man who she was supposed to have had an adulterous relationship with. Will they start doubting their religion? No. Will they even start doubting the poison miracle? No, they will probably add some other hypothesis. They would say, possibly the woman preparing the poison was menstruating, and now we know that when someone is menstruating and prepares the poison, it doesn't work. Yeah? And the problem they encounter is a tiny problem against the whole experience of the world that for them entirely fits their experience. And by the time they encounter other experiences that do not fit, they've forgotten the earlier ones. So there will never be a mass of experiences, or not very easily, that will make them move. So the enormous challenges in interreligious apologetic encounter or witness. And yet I think we need it. We need it first because otherwise we never have an answer to people who suppose, and that's very widely nowadays, that religion basically is a human construction. We construct our own worldviews, our religions. And if it's not a construction, it's simply a valuable tradition. So the construction idea is more postmodern, but many other people will say, my religion is my tradition. If I remember sticking up a conversation on a railway station in Paris with someone who looked like a Sikh, and after questioning he was a Sikh, this religion from India. I asked, what are you? I'm a Sikh. Why are you a Sikh? Because my parents were Sikhs. This is what we are. This is it. At that moment, I picked up a conversation saying, yes, I'm a Christian, and I'm a Christian because my parents were Christian. But in my own discovery, I thought I could not simply be a Christian because my parents were Christian. I needed to work out the truth for myself. I tried to sort of start a conversation there, a very early conversation. I didn't know anything about Sikhism, except that I recognized the term. But that was the beginning of a conversation. But only when you ask questions of truth can you start challenging the idea that religion is just about tradition, adherence to community, or it's your own construction. Secondly, in many parts of the world, interreligious mission is directly criticized as proselytization. This is where we need English speakers. Proselytization.
Wat is het in Nederlands?
Proselytisme.
Even in Dutch.
That's the right question for explanation. Proselytization is actually a negative word for mission, and one of the problems for converting people. Oh, yeah. It's a negative word for converting people.
Pushing people.
And one of the problems with proselytization is that people all mean different things with it. But at least, so what people often mean you force people to your religion, you manipulate them into your religion, but in a context like India or Malaysia or maybe Indonesia, the charges of, you are upsetting the relationships between our communities. What you do is growing your communities, and that upsets the political balance in our countries. So the idea is, this is not about truth. This is about strengthening your community over others, and that is, of course, politically advantageous for your community. You can only answer that charge if you say, this is not merely about my community. This is a question of truth. This is about who God is. This is about where true life can be found. Third reason why we need interfaith apologetic witness, I think, is if we want to reach those that are deeply committed to their religion. Much mission and outreach in relationship to people from other religion happens to those who are already on the margin. I was a missionary for about 8 years in the Central African Republic. Some of the mission happened among Fulani. Fulani are a Muslim group that is widely spread out on the southern edge of the Sahara. And quite a number of them were converted because of mission. But these were basically marginal people that were already looked down upon. And people only looked down upon the missionaries because they picked on these people. And it was not very convincing in a way. And it, of course, only made the community to close itself against another community that was taking away its weaker members and welcoming them. And often these weaker members did actually come because they needed something. They needed food or shelter or protection. If we believe that the Christian faith is truth and want to show that we believe it is true, we should start conversing with the representatives of the religion, with the imams, with the priests, with those who are in the committees that take care of the local Buddhist temples. Yeah? And these people tend to believe their religion because they feel at home in it. But generally, they also feel that it's true. They believe it because it's true. Yeah? And then I move directly to my next point. They do not simply believe that it's true, but they believe that it's more rational than Christianity. We need to be aware that in at least all the religious communities I have encountered, there is also an apologetic for this religion going on. And there's quite a bit of anti-Christian apologetic going on. I visited a temple in Brickfields, Kuala Lumpur, and was a Buddhist temple. And we were sort of shown around, and there were some leaflets where like in a good church, you can find leaflets, and it said, this is only for non-Buddhists to take. Yeah, and I took one leaflet which said, religion for free thinkers. Yeah. And it said, in its explanation of Buddhism, one of the things it said, obviously, a religion cannot be worthwhile if it promises immediate forgiveness for someone who asks for forgiveness just before they die. That's not a good religion. How can a religion? Muslims will generally about the same thing think that, religion always being able to be forgiven. You can't build a society on that, can you? People will just sin, and then, just like the sinner on the cross, they will pray for forgiveness and all is okay. And how do you create a society on the basis of that? But also, isn't it unjust? Isn't the idea that karma is unavoidable, that's of course the Buddhist variety, that karma is unavoidable, is that not a much better way of understanding justice? And we also need to wear in that respect that if you meet people who are religious minorities, that they generally know the religion of the majority well, because that is the religion they relate to. A number of years ago I was invited in a Shiite mosque in Manchester. And I was invited to speak about the Trinity. This was not a debate, I was just an external speaker. It's quite amazing. You go to a mosque, you speak about the Trinity. And I think people were had very double motivations. There were a couple of young people there who were used to interreligious conversations when they were students in a university in Dundee. Is Dundee Scotland, I believe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They had Muslim-Christian conversation there, and they liked to repeat it in the mosque in which they were now a member. And my guess is, but I never checked it, that some other members of the congregation thought, if we ask someone, a Christian, to speak about Christianity, let them do Trinity, because we know that they can only make a fool of themselves by speaking of the Trinity. This is just such an outrageous doctrine. And one of the things I discovered in that conversation is actually that at least a number of people in that community, young people, women, men, the well-educated ones, they knew Christianity well. They knew some of the most common mistakes about Muslim thinking about the Trinity, but they could also quote the Bible and say, how does this relate to this, etc. They were well prepared, or maybe they were well prepared because I came, but they were in a situation of a minority where they knew that as a Muslim I need to relate to this Christian majority and know why I am a Muslim, while most people here are Christians. Just as most Christians in minority situations know how to relate to why I'm not secular, or why I'm, in some of the countries where you come from, why am I not Orthodox? Why am I not Catholic? You know how that is. So there is the need because of anti-Christian apologetics. My impression is that in most interreligious conversations, if you do not address questions of truth, people will simply presume that their religion is rationally superior. That's what they've learned. And they've learned the arguments. They know about it. So let me move to the next section. If there is such a need for interreligious apologetics, and if it is so challenging, what should be the nature of it? What about how should we do it? 4 points. It should be contextual. Because the needs, the questions are so different. I've been interested in apologetics most of my life, and that came partly out of my own search. I grew up in a very warm Christian family. For me, my parents were good examples. I was the type of child who never really rebelled, But as a teenager, I really doubted my faith. I didn't know whether I could go through with this. I needed to know whether it was true. So that's where my personal interest came from. So I did a PhD, partly on apologetics, can we do apologetics after Karl Barth? And some of you who are theologians know how difficult that can be. And then my wife and I were called to be missionaries in the Central African Republic. Yeah? I won't test your geography on that. And one of the courses I had to teach was apologetics, because I was considered to be a specialist in apologetics. So I'd learned my arguments about the existence of God, the reality of evil, the trustworthiness of the Bible, the resurrection, miracles. But the questions were entirely different. No one doubted God. No one had a problem about resurrection. Miracles do, of course, happen. But the worry would rather be, if someone has been dead and he comes back, shouldn't you worry rather than be happy? Yeah? Or the question would be, if someone's ill and they go to the hospital, they're not healed. They go to the doctor. No, they go to the hospital, they're not healed. They go to their pastor. The pastor prays for them. They're not healed. And then they go to a traditional diviner and they're healed. How come? I wasn't all prepared for that. Those were not the questions I had been addressing before. So it should be contextual, and therefore it also should be dialogical. It's not just that the questions in different contexts are different, but all people live in their religion differently. You know, most religions have major streams, or all religions have major streams, but people can be part of a religion wholeheartedly. They can be critical. They can be divided in their heart about their belonging to the religion. It's very different. You can only discover that by really dialoguing. And very often when we engage examples of interreligious apologetics that I know are often very schematic. You know, this is what Hinduism is. And I've been writing a book on interreligious apologetic with a Chinese Malaysian friend, and we would include a chapter on Hinduism. And Western apologetics about Hinduism are mostly about a dialogue with Advaita Vedanta. And Advaita Vedanta, it's this sort of abstract Hinduism where it's monist. Everything is one. Evil does not exist. The end of life is to escape to escape the cycle of rebirth and sort of to lose your entire self. Yeah. It's only and then you have this closed system, and you try to compare that with other closed systems. For example, in a type of worldview apologetics. But it's only in encountering people from India and in reading the literature from the ground, and not the literature from the West about India or from the most strong voices of India, that I discovered that actually on the ground people feel that form of Hinduism is particularly the Brahmin voice, the upper class voice that claims to be the representative of Hinduism, but on the ground it's not necessarily. And we decided in our book to relate to Bhakti Hinduism, which is actually in a number of ways much closer to Christianity, because it focuses on personal relationships of love with a God. Yeah? But Bhakti is of course just one tradition, and there are many traditions, and in those many traditions, people live in very different ways. You could say, oh, here I'm entirely lost now. You know, how could I ever prepare to be an apologist in interreligious relations? Because you never know who you're going to encounter. But that's okay, because part of it is start listening, start dialoguing, start taking people seriously. And probably ask at a certain moment, are there specific groups to whom I am called? Groups that I'm called to learn more about. But in general, when you listen, you always can start conversations. You know, I had this conversation, I've had a few conversations with Sikhs. My first conversation on a railway platform, 5 minutes, you know. But at least I could start sharing why I believed what I believed. And I could listen to this person and try to understand how he accepted his religion. He did not because it was the best religion, but because it was the religion of his parents. And it's interesting to know. It's important to know a person. So it should be contextual, it should be dialogical, it should be holistic. And with holistic, I mean, it should address the entire person. Because religion is not merely a worldview. I always hesitate a bit when we talk a lot about worldview. And we do quite a lot about talking about worldview here. We do things from a Christian worldview. You know, trying people to help to understand the Christian worldview, and let's try to understand the secular worldview. But a religion definitely is a worldview. It's an all-encompassing worldview, and we need to be aware of it. But it's much more than that. It is also an ethos, a lifestyle, you know, and people who are at home in this worldview are also at home in a lifestyle. If you're a Muslim, you believe the Quran to be the word of God, you believe Muhammad to be the seal of the prophets, but you also are at home in a religion that gives you clear guidelines, that tells you what to do, that is feasible. I should say, I find Islam a relatively attractive religion. And in some ways, I understand why people feel attracted to it. It's much easier to understand. It's much easier to live. When I say I read about what a Muslim needs to do to be a good Muslim, I think, whoa, I can do that.
Praying
Never
five,
thought, huh?
praying 5 times a day?
Yeah.
etc.?
Yeah, pray 5 times a day, go to Mecca once in your life, give alms, fast 1 month a year, and there's one more. There are five things you basically need to do. Of course, some people can't do that at all, and it's not necessarily a good religion for everyone, but I'm a reasonably established middle-class person, stable life, I think I can do it. Yeah? Jesus says, give everything away, pray without ceasing. Forgive you.
To name a few.
That's much more. That's much more disturbing. Yeah. So it is a worldview. It is a lifestyle. It shapes your desire, and it also puts you into a whole net of loyalties. Things you find important that you've grown. If you're talking about Islam, then you're not just talking about who is God and who are the prophets and how should we understand the Gospels, etc. We're also talking about what a mess is the United States made of the world. Why did they fight 2 Gulf Wars? Why is the United States supporting Israel against Gaza? These are all things that are part of the conversation. And what should I do with my mom when I become a Christian and she does not, and I have a responsibility caring for her? So it needs to be holistic, and holistic means we'll view lifestyle, emotional lives, hurts quite a bit. Therefore, it also needs to be embodied. I think you've heard the language of plausibility structures. But much that we believe, we do not believe because we strongly believe it's true, but in our world is plausible. And quite a number of things we will not believe even if there are good arguments for it because they're simply not plausible. Yeah? So in our world, in our secular world, many aspects of Christianity are simply not plausible. And we need to think how Christianity for people can not only they cannot only accept the truth of it, but they can only accept the truth if it becomes plausible. Now, I personally would think that in the secular world, Christianity can never be plausible within the secular framework. So it means that they need communities to enter in that provide alternative plausibility structures. They need to see your life, and they need to see the life of a community and think, whoa, I could never have imagined that is true or valuable, but now I can suddenly see that type of life is possible. And that is why also the Christian faith in multi-religious situations, it needs to be embodied in communities so that people can see it lived and that they can even experience it a bit from the inside out. What does it mean? Was it a question? Sorry?
It was a word, but I misheard. I realized that while you were talking.
Good. It's probably we all have different English accents, so.
No, I understand. I just didn't hear the word. But thank you very much.
Good. So I've talked about challenges, the need for interreligious apologetic witness, the nature of it, and I'm going into possibilities. First, if religion is an all-encompassing system, then we need to help people to come to know it as a whole. And it's never possible easily, but we need to make them aware that they cannot understand it if they interpret bits and pieces of the Christian faith within their own worldview, within their own religion. Then it doesn't make sense. Of course, this Buddhist leaflet said that karma is a better idea, but karma is related with all sorts of other things, just as forgiveness is related to all sorts of other things. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So, when I was invited to speak on the Trinity in this Manchester mosque, I
Were you scared?
I did. Huh?
Were you scared?
I did it with some trepidation. Yeah. I wasn't really scared, but I thought, yeah. it was also quite nice to be the only speaker, no one opposite of you. You know, people were asking all the time, but you're just explaining the Trinity. And for me, actually, the Trinity is one of the most beautiful doctrines. Yeah, God is love. God is eternal relationships. And it means that relationship is not an accidental consequence of the existence of the world. It means that relationship is the origin of our existence. It's at the basis of it all. So I tried to say to the people that were there, I said, try for a moment not to think about whether this fits your religion. It does not. Yeah. I want you to understand why for Christians this makes sense. Why for Christians this is a beautiful doctrine. And I explained why for Christians is that it did not, actually I did explain why it did not sort of counteract the idea of the unity of God, because we understand God is one, but it's unity. I did explain why actually for Christians it solves a number of problems, namely why did God create the world. But even before that, I try to tell them how great it is to have a God who is love and who therefore invites us in a relationship of love. How different it is from an idea where in a religion, the fundamental relation between God and humanity is between a master and a servant, or a king and a subject. Because in ordinary life, and I guess that's also true with Muslims, we experience relationships of love as the more important ones, as the deeper ones. Of course, we all know about master relationships, and we see them in the Bible too, also with reference to God. But my deepest relationships are with my parents, my children, my wife. Imagine that God could have a relationship with us similar to that. And it also means actually that according to Orthodox Sunnism, and I think with Shiism it might be the same, we only know God's will. We only know what God asks us to do, but we never know God's self, God's heart, God's character. The Trinity says God can really show who God is by incarnating, and thereby showing God's heart, God's inner being. We know God, we can trust God. And this is, of course, part of what was often said. I think it's who is it? It's Pascal who says, if you argue with someone, you should first make people want something to be true before you argue why you believe it is true. Yeah? And then sort of an extra, because why do Christians actually believe it? We do not believe because at some moment someone woke up and said, this is an interesting mathematical thought, and let's think about 3 and 1 and try to Google it, how we can bring that together. No, it is because we encountered God in Jesus, and that radically changed how we can think about God. And in the end, Christians believe God's self made us completely revise our understanding of who God is. Because God encounters us as Father, Son, and Spirit, and the only way we can do that is Trinity, etc. Yeah? Of course, in such a meeting, no one is converted. Yeah? Or at least I would expect not. I don't know. But after it, a lady came to me and she said, I've always thought that the doctrine of the Trinity is an incredibly old thing, and I've not understood why people could ever believe it. But now I see you, and you're a teacher in Oxford, and I see that an intelligent person can believe it, and that it's attractive. It's a great thing to have achieved in life. Yeah? Because that means that before, if she would have known about Christianity, one of the reasons why she would never have considered it is because it's completely unreasonable. And suddenly think, actually, maybe it's not. It's a big thing. Yeah? So introduce people in Christianity as a whole. And Christianity as a whole is huge. And keeps growing. So try to remain also somewhere near the center. And the center, of course, is Christ. Yeah? An interreligious witness should therefore always be witness to Christ. Because how do we know that God is 3 in 1? Because of Jesus. How do we know that God is forgiving? Because of Jesus. How do we know that forgiveness is good, etc.? Because of Jesus. And I would always try, generally in apologetic conversations, not to let myself be tracked off in all sorts of directions, but if ever possible, trying to start talking about Jesus. Because this is the only reason we believe we have access to God. We know who God is. Yeah? And that's a historical reality. God revealed God's self in history. And therefore we need witness. And I think one of the things we need to get around in apologetics is to no longer create an opposition between witness and apologetics. You know, we cannot defend the faith, we can only witness. Actually, witness is a form of defense. There's a lot of things we only believe on the basis of witness. Yeah? Things that actually are really important to me, to my identity. I believe that my father is Gerrit van den Toren. My mother is Debbie van den Toren. Yeah? I trust them for it. They could have made it up. And as a child, I may have dreamt or late at night, you know, maybe I'm a prince. But I'm not. I don't doubt I'm there. Just because they tell me. You know? There's so many things. So we stick our life all the time on things that people tell us and that we trust because they've heard it and they trust the people they hear it from. You know, I'm suffering from symptoms. The doctor says you probably have malaria. If you're in the CR, you can be killed from malaria, or you have something else and it can kill you. And he says, please take this medication, that's okay. I trust my life to some I don't even know very well personally, or I trust the system, I don't know. But witness to Christ. And of course, when you witness, critical questions come up. Our witness should be accountable. We should be willing to give an account and answer questions, but be aware in interreligious relationships that those questions will probably be very different from what you are encountering in the West. So when you witness to the resurrection of Christ, you know, it's not about a miracle maybe. It's not about the trustworthy, if you talk with Muslims, then it's straight away about the trustworthiness of the scripture. It is he actually crucified? Could Allah allow his servant to be crucified, etc.? But that's very different questions than people would ask in the West. And if you're in a Hindu context, then the question would probably be, you know, why would we actually even be interested in someone who rose from the dead, 2,000 years ago? Or is this not something similar to stories we've already in our community, etc.? I think it's part of witness that you always tell a story, and it's only after you tell a story that you discover where the problems are, what people cannot accept, and that allows you to explain further, to argue further, to give more detail, etc. So, invite people in Christianity as a whole, stick to the center, which is Christ, which means interreligious apologetics is always also witness to Christ. But you can also build bridges. You can build bridges to things that we have in common. Like the experience I had with one Suk, who said we didn't have a lot in common, but we did have in common that we knew that things are not as they seem. Yeah? Which actually we were discussing earlier somewhere, that is something that is quite common in conspiracy theories, and Christians can relate to that. Things are not as they seem. We did have in common that we both loved our families. And then I come up to the final point, simply because also the time is running out. There is one specific type of bridges that I think are very, very valuable, and that are bridges to tensions in other positions and in other lives. There are things that rub in people's lives and in people's worldviews. You know, we had another talk in the academics track. Which was about the fact that many people in the West accept human rights, and yet they have an evolutionary worldview that does not allow a justification for human rights. You know, that's a deep tension. and you can play on that tension and start discussing. That's a tension within a worldview, and many worldviews have those tensions, because I think all worldviews can only find a true unity if Christ is at the center. But there are also another type of tensions, which are tensions between your worldview and your life. You cannot get the two together. And those are interesting, because those tensions can help you start moving. Look for something else. Final story. Paul Williams is an English professor of Tibetan Buddhism. He grew up as an Anglican, and he became, in the 70s, with his whole interest in Eastern religion, he became a Tibetan Buddhist, and became a professor of Tibetan Buddhism. And for decades, he invested himself in Tibetan Buddhism, not just as a scholar, but also as a religious person. And then in the early 2000s, 2003 I believe, he became a Christian, and he tells the story in an unexpected way. It's not very well told, but it's very interesting how he tells it. And one of the things I really like, he talks about, philosophical problems in Buddhism that he could not solve, what is the nature of morality. But he also said, I tried to be a Buddhist so hard. And I know that in a second life, I will be reborn in a lower state than now. I fail. He says, and for me, if religion could work, it should not only be a religion for saints, because I'm not a saint. I need a religion for sinners. And Christianity is a religion for sinners. It's a great story, So he feels the tension in his life between a religion, which might actually be a closed system that no one can put a hole in. It doesn't work. He can't feel at home. It can't help him for who he is. And that makes him search for something else. There's a deep tension between who he is and what his religion can provide. Good. Let's stop her. I try to bring this all together in the concept of humble confidence. We need humility, because there's so much out there. We don't know the answers. We don't know all the positions. We don't know how people live. And yet we have confidence that in Christ we have come to know God. And we simply witness to Him. And try to think further about the questions when they come up in these conversations. I thank you.
We've got a bit of time for questions, so maybe just take 30 seconds, have a look back through your notes, other questions that came up, maybe just speak to the person next to you, what question have they got, and Benno will take some questions from the floor. Just stick your hand in the air, and then Benno will answer them as they come.
Sorry, what was the name of that last scholar?
Paul Williams. Paul Williams. The book is called The Unexpected Way.
I think it's which might be I think that's how
Okay, it sounds like there's some questions brewing. Maybe if you've got a question, just stick your hand up, and then Benno will just point, and we'll go from there. Yeah.
So my question is, what about, like, Anders, you talk about lots of situations where you're on a very different page to the other person.
Yeah.
What about when you're kind of on the same page, but there's underlying differences? For example, I'm thinking about in Moldova, you're not really talking to people who are like all these other Eastern religions. There's people, Orthodox Christians, for example, and they themselves consider evangelical Christians, they even say in their own language, it's a different religion.
Yeah.
But when you try to talk to these people, you're talking about faith, belief, Jesus' resurrection, they agree with everything at a superficial level, but
Yeah.
there's some sort of underlying differences, and it's very difficult because how can you overcome those barriers, those similarities?
Yeah. I think that part of the where this story helps in a way is that it may also be important to realize that also for them their religion, which in this case is a certain expression of the Christian religion, is an all-encompassing system, and that their hesitation to talk with you has to do with a long tradition that has created a certain plausibility structure. It relates to how they evaluate true claims about the understanding of Christianity. For you, the Bible may be the place to go to. For them, is the priest, because the priest has access to knows how what the councils have said. It may also be that it is related to, part of the all-encompassing system is also what they think salvation should look like and how you get it. They're not even hoping maybe for what you would call a personal relation with Jesus. Why would you? They expect from a religion that it regularly gives them a transcendent experience when they take the sacraments, and that prepares them for the final theosis at the end of their lives. Yeah. If they know the religion that well, I don't know. Yeah. So I guess that also there, what needs to happen is that they come to know Christians in their environment whom they trust in a way, whom they respect, and that you can come to a point where either they feel so uneasy in their own position that they will start exploring an alternative, and they might come to your Seek the Bible study, they become more open and they start exploring that. But I think you need to be real about it, that they will in generally not leave their own position unless they have some serious experience of an alternative. So when you think about interreligious apologetics, but this works more widely, I often think in terms of two circles, two different plausibility structures, two different worldviews, two different ethos, and you're in one, you're in the other. There's always some overlap. The overlap will be different in your case than it will be in dialogue with Muslims, than it will be in dialogue with Hindus or with secular people. But people will only start thinking when they have an experience of this life, at least initially, when they have tasted some of it, when they have discovered its plausibility for people who live here, and then at a certain moment, then they tend to be able to pull their other leg there. So people, for most people, conversation takes a long time of an inner conversation between two different positions, starting with little doubt, exploration, and finally making the step. And that's important because in many cases, people, they need to explore quite a bit before they make the step and finally pull their other leg. And actually, sadly, in case of Muslims, it often happens that they explore deeply and pull back. And that's then often for social reasons, not for faith reasons. Yeah. But it can also be that people, for certain personal reasons, quickly jump to another position. They may be refugees, they end up in a situation where they're completely dislocated and so on. But then that inner dialogue still needs to happen, but it needs to happen after conversion. And otherwise, there is quite a risk that people will either they will remain very wobbly, or they will fall back on their older position lately. Yeah. So my idea would be, interreligious conversions always take time, either before the conversion or actual conversion or after the actual conversion. And the reason why we find it difficult in the West probably is because our model of conversions has for a long time been shaped by Billy Graham. You know, Billy Graham crusade. You come, now I'm converted. One event, maybe short Bible course. Baptized. But that whole idea of the revival meetings presupposes a broad Christian culture where people basically understand Christianity and they need this one moment to make the choice. Yeah? It's like, you know, I've always known the daughter of my neighbor and suddenly I realized she could be my wife, you know. I've always known her, but that's very different from seeing someone for the first time and thinking she might be my wife, you know. If you do that, some people fall in love, head over heels, I think you say, yeah? Then you definitely need to, afterwards, do a bit of thinking, whether this works, you know. So we no longer have the situation of a general knowledge of Christianity which can lead to an immediate conversion. We need that's in general in the West. It's also true. Yeah. I'm constantly thinking which side of my slide I should stand. Yeah, Timon.
Yes, I wanted to. So if I see this, I don't know whether you would say, but to try to understand this, I feel like yes, I am one of that person. I would not start to be a Muslim very easily.
Yeah.
So would you say like we are also, so how you describe?
Yeah, no. One of the a lot of this is also about sociology of knowledge, for example. You know, the whole idea of plausibility structures and so on. Mm. And we are also, you know, we are embodied persons. We are part of a community. There are things that are plausible for us and so on. And one of the things we need to realize is that the fact that all these dynamics play out do not make Christianity true or untrue. You know, so sociology says also, you know, Christianity is simply the plausibility of a structure, it's of a community. It's no more than a tradition. It's no more than a human construct, because that's how they look at it. And therefore, also, you need within all this constantly also to ask the question of what is true. Yeah? But realizing how deeply you are embedded in your community and in your how plausible this is, how difficult it would be for you to embrace something else, helps you understand others. Yeah? I sometimes say, also to just break on the ground, say when I was one of the things that made me doubt when I was a teenager, because I was in a vaguely Christian school and I tried to talk about Jesus, and people said to me, you know, if you were born in Morocco, then you would probably be a Muslim. Mm. And honestly thinking, given the type of personality I am, I would be a serious Muslim. You know, I would be quite fanatic about it, because if I do something, I'm all out. You know, and actually just realizing that you could be born in a different place and you will be an entirely different person, raises the stakes about the question of truth, because it doesn't mean that suddenly the question of truth doesn't matter anymore, but it means that the question of truth is embedded in all sorts of relationships. And that's why I talk about holistic and embodied apologetics. Yeah. So we are not free-floating minds. And it's good to recognize that for yourself too. Yeah.
You said about building bridges, and then you said building specific kinds
of bridges. Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Because I think I do not listen good, but I thought you did not work it out.
No, I did go pretty quickly at the time because I was running out of time. What I mean by building bridges, you can bring people into your world, the Christian perspective, invite them in. That's what I tried to do in Manchester. Yeah? And that's what I tried to do discussing with Wonsuk. Wonsuk never became a Christian, by the way, sadly. I was in Seoul a couple of weeks ago and I tried to find people who could help me locate him, and I could not. But you can also build bridges. There are always points of connection. You know, you meet someone and the connection, you know, things are not as they seem. Or the desire to look for forgiveness. The sacrifice, the practice of sacrifice. The practice of prayer. You know, these are all sort of bridges, but they're never the same bridges. You know, I talk to a secular person and maybe their strong sense of human rights or their strong awareness that evil is wrong could be a starting point. It could be a bridge. Yeah, so those are bridges. But there's one, and sometimes they're very specific. Also, like, you know, there's language about Jesus in the Quran which suggests that it's more like a prophet, more than a prophet, and then you can use that. And actually, people do that who know the Quran much better than I do. Yeah. But I said there's one specific type of bridge, and that is related. That's a 4-point that is related to tensions in worldviews and tensions in people's lives. And that is, if you think of two worlds, then you can build a bridge, yeah? But the fact that there is a bridge does not necessarily mean that people start exploring the bridge. You know, so Christ is a push factor, a pull factor, you might say. Think about it as people are in different worlds and pull and push factors. Christ is, I think, the ultimate pull factor. Exploring the Christian world, Jesus is the pull factor. The bridge makes it possible to make it. He draws you to Him. Oh, yeah. But tensions are push factors. Mm-hmm. They make you move. Yeah. Think about another example, which I like. It comes from the book of Os Guinness. Os Guinness wrote in the 70s a book about different worldviews and the search for Christianity as a third way. I don't remember the title, sorry. But he tells somewhere the story of a Japanese poet, and I forgot his name. And this poet lived, I believe, in the 17th century. And he lost his wife and 5 children. Deeply devastated. He went to a Zen priest, Zen Buddhist priest. And the priest was wise. He didn't say something for a long time. He was silent like the friends of Job. And then he said, the world is dew. Dew like the water on the grass in the morning. Yeah? The wereld is dauw.
Oh, dauw. Yeah.
Dauw.
Yeah.
The world is dew. And then, what does that mean for Buddhism? It means that it's nothing. It will just evaporate. You know, we were in a Buddhist temple and we saw all these beautiful flowers at the altar and we as a Christian think, wow, we bring the gifts of creation in there. They said, no, that's not it. We bring flowers in because we meditate on flowers because we see how short-lived they are. Like more extreme, we meditate on a flame because you look at a flame and it's already gone when you look at it. You know, it's already a different flame. So the world is dew. It's nothing. It evaporates. And then, Isa is the name. Isa, I-S-A. Isa writes a haiku. I like haikus. These are the shortest poems. And that's why I can remember. And the poem is: the world is dew. The world is dew. And yet. And yet. Mm. And yet. So, apparently, my religion tells me that it's nothing that my wife died, that my children died. But I can't accept it. I just cannot. Yes. That's a push factor. Yeah? Mm. So tensions, just like the fact that Paul Williams says, I've worked so hard at Buddhism for decades, and I know that when I will be reborn, I will be a cockroach or something, but definitely not in the better stages now. I've only accumulated negative karma, if I'm honest. Yeah? That's a push factor. I need a religion for sinners. You had a question?
Yeah. If I understood well, first of all, thank you. It was very enlightening. I would like to visualize it as two bubbles, and we're trying to connect our world and non-Christian world.
Yeah.
So we are trying to get into their bubble or bring their bubble into ours. So
Yeah.
we have a holistic approach. So what can we do, and can we apply this when we have someone that is already Christian? So they have some beliefs of this, but they don't have all the beliefs we think are the right ones. I mean, we're trying to persuade someone that we want them to become Christian by some points of view. So how can we change a point of view to someone that is already Christian and does not accept everything? For example, I have a friend that curses, and he says it's alright. So how can I bring him into my bubble? Can I apply it?
Yeah. I think one of the things we need to realize that none of our lives and none of our worldviews are perfect. So part of it is also that we accept that that the life of discipleship and the life of understanding is a continuous growth. So there is a danger if someone just jumps because at certain moments you can jump. I did say, I said either you're a refugee or you fall in love with someone who is a Christian and you think, well, this person, but you start wavering later. Then you need to do some significant thinking about where you are. But you also need to be realistic and say that is a continuing process. We need to keep growing. That's actually a continuous aspect of our lives. Sometimes we think that everyone needs to make a choice for the Christian faith, but we need to make many choices. It's particularly important for students nowadays. I think that in the West where we live now, many children who grow up in Christian families need to make their first real choice about their faith at the age of about 11, 12. If they don't do that, they're already starting to live different lives. Yeah? But they definitely need to remake the choice later, maybe at the age of 18. I don't know, when they sort of start to become more independent, when they go to university or so. That's our context. You need to say, am I going to bring my Christianity in this entirely new context? Where we in the Netherlands see that it often goes wrong, it's not at the age of 18, but at the age of 23. People have remained in a Christian bubble, they've enjoyed it, they start work, and then suddenly they think they can do without. Yeah? For many people, they fail, I see in the Netherlands. I don't know if whether failing is the right word, but they drop out because they can't find a life partner. And in the end, they give up for their religion or it's not that they give up their religion. They think they continue it, but because it becomes individualized, it becomes secondary in their relation because they prefer having a life partner even if the life partner is not a Christian. And I need to do it every time again. And there may be a moment where the ultimate choice needs to be made, when you are in stato confessiones, you may be martyred. And I hope that I have the courage, So it's something that is a continual process. So it's very dangerous to think you make your choice for Christ once. Yeah?
Thank you.
Yeah. Questions at the back. You, sorry. Oh, no, not entirely in the back. Let's start with you. Sorry, I don't know your name. Kezia.
Thank you. I'm just thinking of in a Christian Union context with students, we often get, and one of the C's I work with in the UK, we will often get students from different religions come along. I think because of various cultural things, the way they engage in the room can often feel quite different to the way a home student would engage, just with a talk from the front.
Yeah.
And also another thing we struggle with is that they'll come and enjoy a conversation, but then you never see them again.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have experience or advice on helping our students run events that kind of get to the depth of relationship, that it feels like a lot of relating to people with other religions feels like you need a real depth of relationship, you need time.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of thoughts on how we can help Christian unions do that in kind of public events well?
Yeah. No, I don't. So does anyone else have experience with that? Because I can understand that happens. And we, I recently spoke at an evangelistic event in Wageningen, one of our university cities, and the topic was, if God exists, why does God not reveal himself more clearly? And there was at least one veiled Muslim young student present, and I was straight away aware that she would listen to the question very differently. Thankfully, in my talk, I ended up by saying, if you want to know more about God, who often is ambiguous, look at Jesus. But I have no idea whether the student community picked that relationship up, for example. Yeah. We do have experience in the Netherlands, and some others may be able to talk about that, with sort of, I know that in the past there were Bible reading groups of Muslims and Christians together, for example, that were specifically aimed at this group. And we often, at least people from other religions find it often easier to come into a religious event, so they are probably overrepresented. Yeah. And it would be worthwhile asking if people do not come back, what is it?
Yeah.
What do we do wrong? Someone else who has experience in that respect.
Benno, can you stand to the middle again?
Thank you. Oh, there's a camera.
Yeah. But the cameraman ran away, so I tried to fill in the gap.
To understand the question, what is the question?
So the question basically is, if you have people in evangelistic events that come from different religious backgrounds, it often seems hard to bring them into a longer relationship with the community.
Yeah.
They easily sort of walk away. They come. It's often a one-off visit. Yeah.
Okay. But what I see people getting into the community more often now because the community is present at the place.
Yeah.
So the community is actually, it just grew like this. So it's not been so. The community is already there. So this guy comes in, he doesn't listen to the talk even because he didn't have time, but he comes back. Why? He says, I feel this community and I see that you are a community already. So if they have to get from the place to a community, an invitation, I find this also very difficult and challenging, especially in the Netherlands. But the community now in our events is very often already there.
Yeah.
They are the event.
Yeah. Maybe one further thought there. For quite a number of people from other religious contexts, the personalized religion in Christian events, in evangelical events particularly, is very strange. Yeah? So for them, the idea that religion is about your personal experiences, and that's very strange. So sometimes students from other religious contexts, they relate to debates. Yeah. But in Groningen, where Timen and I lived and Timen is still there, we ran a monthly. There are different English services, but we ran a monthly international service in the main sort of cathedral-like church in the city. And there were quite regular Muslim students coming in, even from Saudi Arabia. And part of it is that type of atmosphere, I think, fits their religious self-understanding, and they could, I think, sell it to themselves and their family as a cultural event. Yeah? So, more formal, it might be that you should say, shall we visit the cathedral? Which is not the evangelical thing to do. Yeah.
So they're like actual more formal religious
things. And more, a bit of incense would help. Good. There was one line back. There was a question. Yeah. No. Oh, so
Okay, so
yeah.
I can go. So I had a few times the experience that I wanted to talk with a student from another religion and offered him, we can read your scriptures and read apart from mine. You know,
Yeah.
something similar like what you did with the Buddhist gentleman, your friend. And both times the answer was like, I don't want to do this because I am not well. It was sort of like, you are too well versed in yours and I'm not well versed enough.
Yeah.
I'm not expert enough to speak. But I'm convinced that this is true.
Yeah.
But I'm not an expert enough to speak. So what would you do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would also feel very uncomfortable if I wouldn't be that other person. You know, you want a sort of an equal relationship. First, one of the things we need to realize that not in every religion scriptures are equally important. You know, scriptures have become important in our understanding of, for example, Hinduism and Buddhism, but that people call that sort of a Christianization of other religions. You know, because people who studied Hinduism and Buddhism were in the beginning mostly Christians who thought that Buddhism was like Christianity. So they asked who is the founders, what are the scriptures, you know, who are the leaders, what are their rituals. They basically thought about it in the same way. But it may be that in those religions, in Hinduism at least, the scriptures have a very different role from. So it's not necessarily the case. So it may be that actually for some, an experience of a Christian ritual is a better way to get into Christianity because that's what they understand, or prayer, or, yeah. I think that actually if you push too hard on this, then it might also become manipulative because you know your scriptures much better than the other. Who is the author of the book Searching Allah, Finding Jesus? Qureshi. He at a certain moment sort of starts debating things and then they start discussions, not actually reading the scriptures, but basically his friend says, I bring my pastor, you bring your imam. So they create equality by bringing more people in. And actually for Qureshi, it's a real revelation that his imam doesn't know the answer because your friend or the person you meet thinks, you know, my imam will know the answer or my other religious leader, they will know the answer. And as long as they've never spoken to the leader, you know, they believe they know all the answers. So actually, if ever you could create a situation where you say, let's then bring in more people and bring in the local specialists, yeah? And we'll do it together. And then it becomes a really interesting conversation. I don't know whether that's possible, but yeah. Tima.
Did you ever have the confidence to say, okay, well, let's search for reasons in your plausibility bubble?
That is, you mean reasons for your faith?
If he says, certainly I expect that if there's a desire, I say, okay, let's see what your faith arguments are.
Yeah.
Because you can be.
So in my conversation with Wansuk, it was definitely also about exploring why he believed what he believed. So that was definitely sort of a mutual exploration. Yeah. In general, and I don't know whether it's just my style or a general, you know, if I talk to a Muslim, for example, or Buddhist, I would wait as long as possible before I start debunking their religion. I don't like doing that. So, and it's partly because I feel that they will get on the defense, and that's not helpful. I would major on the push and pull factors. And in the end, of course, they will also need to recognize that Muhammad is not a true prophet. You know, I think Muhammad is not compatible with Jesus. And that in the end, the Buddha, Gautama the Buddha, does not provide the enlightenment that he promises. But my personal tendency would be that, I just don't like the debunking. But, yeah. Ben, you had a question.
Lots of us will be speaking sort of in one-off events.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about building relationships, about the length of time it takes. What implications do you think this has for when we're speaking evangelistically?
Yeah.
And especially to audiences where we're conscious that there will be people from other religious backgrounds?
Yeah. I think that sometimes it is about setting yourself realistic aims. Yeah, and so I thought that for this talk in Manchester, for people realizing that if I ever would start considering it seriously, then at least I would consider Christianity, because I see that intelligent people can embrace it. That's a real step. Yeah. And there's always different people there, you know. So I remember I was once in a it's a long time ago already. I was still a student worker myself. I was a student worker from 92 till 96. Good, long time ago. And I was invited to a public debate in Rotterdam organized by the student union between an imam, a Christian, was I, and a humanist. Interestingly, in the debate, the humanists completely dropped out. You know, people were not interested in the humanists; they were interested in the imam and me as a Christian. And part of the reason, I think, was that it was a great event, because the imam had taken all the youth of his mosque to the event. So there was a real good crowd there, with the risk, of course. And for them, humanism was not an option. You know, Christianity, or that was the real thing for them. The danger was that for them, I realized soon, for them it was a sort of a boxing match. You know, they were quite polite, but you know, if I gave a good punch, then half the crowd would sort of innerly cheer and the other way around and so on. And in that case, actually, what you do not, of course, your conversation is with the imam, but not in order to convince the imam. You are there because there are people in the room with different questions. And there are probably, guessing from the Netherlands, there are probably many Christians in the Christian Union who says, I would never dare to say that Christianity is more attractive than Islam. How could they ever have that courage? You know, they would say it's possibly the same, or I'm a Christian because I'm born there. You know, the simply engaging in the discussion, helping them see that these things matter. Yeah? And that it's great to be a Christian. That's a gain for them. Yeah? I think that there are, at a Muslim side, students who would never think that Christianity could be, by a mile, a valid option. And if they start thinking that it is helpful. And there may also be a few who are wavering. Yeah? And they may have their real questions. They may even ask them as theoretical questions, but it may be their own question. And if you present a winsome and attractive picture of Christianity, and of Christianity is something that you can be confident about, then you may do something really important. So I think we need to think about people travel a long distance often, and you help them along the way. I think that's an important way, and it depends on where they are. Yeah. Yeah, question at the back. Someone hit us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So looking at that, you mentioned about approaching it holistically.
Yeah.
And presenting Christianity as possible, not just from a kind of academic
Yeah.
point of view, but also I actually live this life.
Yeah.
Of what it do to my society, to my
Yeah.
whole life. I imagine that will take a long time.
Yeah.
I'm interested if you've seen any good examples of how you can actually do that in letting somebody from another religion see what it means to live as a Christian, imagine what it would be like for them to become a Christian and how that could become possible.
I recently met Mohammed, who was baptized in June in the city of Leiden in the Netherlands, who had been part of HOST, which is international student work he's from Pakistan, for about 2 2-3 years constantly asking these questions and seeing people live the Christian faith. And in the end he said, you know, I think I can keep asking questions, but I've seen enough and I should make up my mind. Yeah? So that has been an environment where it could happen. But that's basically a place where people can see the Christian life lived. Yeah? So that type of community. One of the things I do not know, I generally do not know, is what nowadays would happen on the internet. Because my guess is that people from other religious backgrounds who search for the truth and who of course would be anxious to do that all too publicly, could use the internet as a major resource and have no idea how to do it. It would be very interesting if there is anyone who wants to do a good master's thesis, you know.
Last question.
To add on this, for our own experience, so I think that in the years to come, we will experience a huge stream of migrants coming, for example, to the Netherlands or other places. And when that was the case from Ukraine, there was a specific question: do you want to open your house?
Yeah.
This is, for me, one of the examples where this can happen. And it's maybe good as well to think about this. If people will come to, if you are living in one of the richest countries, that opening your house is a perfect way of showing at least that holistic ideal of living.
We've had years in a row, we have had dinners on Christmas Day with some of the international students of the PTHU, which is my school. Those are mostly Christians, but what often happens is it's quite fun to see it happen that the days before people say, oh, I met this other Pakistani who has no place to go, can you join your Christmas dinner? And then, you know, we have a half Indian Christian friend, he comes and he brings another Indian friend who is fully Hindu, and you end up sharing Christmas, and they know the very Christmas meal. So, you know, you read the Bible, you discuss it, you sing a couple of Christian songs, you explain it, you know, it's great. It's just by welcoming people in your family. Yeah. Great way of spending Christmas. Good.
It's great.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think we're at time. Let's thank Benno for his let me pray for us as we go and for the food we're going to eat, and then I'm sure if you've got more questions, you can come and find Benno now or grab him over a meal or coffee. Let me pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for our time together. Thank you for the way in which we've been encouraged to think about what gracious apologetics looks like with those who don't know you and who are lost as they follow other worldviews and religions. Lord, we pray that both for us ourselves, for the students that we serve and work alongside, that we might consider what it looks like to point people to the Lord Jesus with those push and pull factors that help people see the hollowness of their own worldview, but also the beauty of Christ. Lord, we pray that you'd help us to put that into practice in our own ministries across this continent. And we pray that you bless our food now. In your Son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. There's actually, I brought a couple of copies of our book on humble soul, so people are interested.
Thanks, Benno. I've got to go do something else, but I'll catch up at some point.